It's coming.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll let the record reflect that we went into executive session until I have 8:56 to discuss matters relating to contracts and employment. Trustees, other issues for the public session. I would put out that I wanted to ask the question about, in our last meeting, we voted to set the date of the election, which since then we did in fact get the governor's order that we cannot have the election, then it's postponed to June 1st. So I wanted to ask the question if we need to officially rescind that motion in some way.
Jack, would it be better, because we don't have a date yet, to modify the motion at a later time when we set it?
No, it's
There's no point. There's no point in taking any action with respect to the election at this stage. We're going to have to wait until they figure out when the election is. They're going to have to figure out how people run for the school board seats. They're going to have to figure out how you get signatures on petitions. They're going to have to figure out all of the notice dates. I wouldn't do anything, at least until the governor gives you some more information.
Thank you, Jack. Let me ask you this. When we made our motion to set the date of the election, it generally triggers a very specific series of events, including public notices in newspapers, etc. So having made that motion and having triggered a train of events, do we not need to stop that in some way?
Well, you shouldn't be doing any of the publications. You're not allowed to have any of the budget meetings. The governor has literally shut down the whole election process.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable making a motion just rescinding, you certainly can do that. I don't think you need to do it. And I think you will have a motion coming up probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks when they come back and say, this is how we're going to approach this. He does know you're going to have a budget vote. He does know you're going to have, actually, the truth is that the board seats aren't as significant because you're all holdovers if there's no election. So those of you in position would continue until there's an election. But I think he knows that you need to have a budget in place effective July 1. The problem he's going to have is figuring out how you conduct an election if you're still conducting social distancing. And that's why I think he really hasn't come back with anything yet.
Of course, I'm sympathetic to all of those issues, but the board made a motion which triggers a series of events.
I understand, and all that's been negated by his executive order. That's all I'm saying to you. If you feel more comfortable making a motion so that you have rescinded the motion that you made, I don't have an issue with it. I just don't think you have to do it. That's all.
Can I suggest that we might just wait another week or two before we decide on what to do with this?
You know, it's not like this is just North Shore that's going through this. This is a statewide event. Everybody's going to be in the same place. So I don't think anything changes whether you do anything or not. And you will have to make your motion to set an entirely new schedule. And we don't even know what it's going to look like, except that there will probably be some form of budget hearing held similarly to the way this meeting is held. But it's all New Frontier, Sarah. So it's all going to depend on what he comes down.
That all makes sense to me. I think the question I had was not for us, not for other people who are in the know, but for the public. Theoretically, the public heard a resolution we made that was, as Sarah said, going to launch a series of events that are now not going to happen. We just want to make sure that we're really being fair and transparent, that people who may not catch this or who may have only heard that are looped in, because everyone catches pieces of what's going on, not the whole thing.
Can I suggest?
Saying we really don't need that, it's unnecessary. I can live with that, but I certainly understand what Sarah's asking.
Can I, if it makes sense to a number of people, let's just rescind even though it may not be necessary, let's just rescind it, and so we don't have that issue in front of us? Can I make a motion?
You can just easily post on your website that the whole thing has been delayed. It really, what we're talking about really is it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's not going to change anything one way or the other. There's almost nobody is going to be expecting your school board election in May because everything is closed down. It's not just your election that's been closed down. But if you guys feel you need to tell the community you're doing this because they wouldn't know otherwise, so rescind the motion.
I mean, I emailed the community this week to just yesterday or the day before to let them know that it's postponed. We may want to put together a communication from the board that's just short and more specific to this subject.
And post it, because I think people will check it on the website more than anything else. The email does not reach the entire community, as we know. It only reaches the school community and those who specifically subscribe.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the board is looking for and I could be misreading, but I think the board is looking for not like, what do we have to do? What is urgent important, but what is the best possible way to proceed when you're dealing with an issue of a public vote? If we wish to undo,
I think a notice on the website is sufficient. I really do. I think Jack is saying is sufficient.
I agree.
I agree also.
Okay.
I agree also. I don't really want to make a motion because I don't know what the ramifications of making a motion rescinding it are either. Because what you may do at a later date is not rescind it, you may modify it.
Right.
In
Yeah.
accordance with the further directive of the governor of the state of New York, that this is how we're going to do the elections and we're modifying the date. And I think we should do a notice on the website
Right.
and not
Definitely.
necessarily do a motion now. Let's wait and see.
I'm comfortable with that, but I would not be if we hadn't had this conversation. So as long as this conversation is part of the minutes, it's another way to back it up. I'm fine with that being a partner piece to the posting on the website.
I agree.
Okay.
Anyone else on this? Okay.
Are we done with that issue?
I think we're done with that issue. You have another?
I just wanted to follow up since we discussed it at the last meeting about, are we making any strides in terms of consistency and instruction in terms of what is being done by grade level, in terms of whether it's a Google Classroom or posted assignments, corrections, and it's, the type of instruction that's going out.
Yeah, here's what I'll do. I will put together, the answer is yes. Excuse me. I will put together a document with Chris. We'll send it out to the board that will describe exactly what's happening, the efforts that we're making. And then we'll also we have a survey out right now to parents. We'll be able to get some data back to you. We have a survey that we'll launch to the faculty, hopefully tomorrow. And we have a survey that we'll be launching to all students in grades 5 through 12. That'll be launching over the next day or two. And then we'll be able to, I think what will be helpful for us to do is give Chris and I an opportunity to really harness this for the board and then have a public discussion with the board in this way about what's going on, if that makes sense for you.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think though, once we have that information, I understand it's an evolving process and it's a fluid time. Once you've gathered that information, and you have it for the board, I do think there should be a public discussion about it at the whenever we schedule our next meeting so that the public can also have access to that information.
Yep, that's exactly what I just said. So I agree.
Okay, I didn't hear the part about putting it
it's
on
okay.
an agenda. On,
I agree with you.
okay.
Can I
The-
just add to that?
Sure.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Could there be a component of that does speak to the singular issues of special education administration?
Mhm.
Because we also
Absolutely.
have this annual review time of year. And I do have some friends in other districts who have actually held annual reviews and CSEs on conference calls, not on Google Meets, but conference calls. So just as a plan to address annual reviews.
Absolutely, yes.
And there have been some districts who have been able to deliver special education services to be in compliance with the student's IEP through Zoom and Google Meet type situations. Obviously, it's not possible to do it with every student, depending on what the IEP calls for, but it will be interesting in that report to include what we have been doing to try and be in compliance as best we can with the IEPs.
No problem.
Thanks, Marianne.
I wanted to make a point with regard to the discussion we were having with cash flow earlier. It made me really reflect on the larger issues that we could have with cash flow going forward, and with the tremendous impact the school closures are going to have on our budget. And so what I wanted to ask and see if I had the board support for is I very much feel like we have to see new budget projections for where we're going to end this budget year, assuming schools stay closed. I do not have a good enough sense as a trustee about where our costs increase and where our costs decrease with schools being closed. And I think it really impacts where we end the year, and thus really impacts the funds we do or do not have going forward. And the sooner we have that information, I think is critical. Because we may need legislative solutions potentially, depending on where that answer ends up. And the other part of that is if we anticipate having new and different cash flow issues, I think we need a very significantly different process on cash flow. As you all know, we get treasurer's reports once a month. And if you go all the way through the treasurer's report to the very end, there is a cash flow projection. That cash flow projection is, of course, based on past experience, but more importantly, it's on a monthly basis. And I think what we've seen with cash flow right now, and what we are very likely to see with cash flow going forward, particularly if the governor were to delay the deadline on the second half of the school tax payments, is that cash flows could become a much, much more fluid item than it's ever been in the past. And so I think one of the structures I would really like to see in place is that we are looking at cash flow projections on a weekly basis rather than a monthly basis. So those two pieces, that we have a revised projected budget for the end of the year, assuming schools do not reopen, and that we change our cash flow projections to look at a week by week basis. But those are my feelings, and I'm interested in what the board thinks. Because clearly they involve work on part of the district.
I think if we have the staff to give us updated cash flow projections, I would be interested in receiving those reports.
I agree. I also, in the past, The borrowing in the TANs has always been offset by a commensurate interest we gain at the money we have in the bank as far as offsetting the expense. In the zero interest world, I don't know that's going to be true. So that also affects how those TANs will function and reinforces the efforts we should go to try to avoid having to have our president put pen to paper.
Anyone else? Any objections?
No,
No.
No,
Thank you. The only other comment, I'm sorry, go ahead, Superintendent.
I was gonna say, we'll make it so.
Thank you.
okay. So,
The only other comment I was gonna make, just generally is that the virtual meetings make executive session very tricky. And I think we might want to, I'm just gonna put it out there that we might want to discuss in the future that trustees may wish to use headphones, earbuds for executive session to make sure the computers aren't broadcasting past their own individual selves when we have to go into exec. A public session is a public session.
can I raise one more thing on public session?
Yes,
There
please.
was an email that went out about the Glen Head parade today. I do think there was a misunderstanding because the faculty had set a date and a time for that parade. It was scheduled at least as early as Tuesday of this week for 2:00 on Friday. So I think there's some confusion created by the email. Obviously, Dr. Jurizzo was not aware that the staff, because I think this is the staff generated event, not a event that is being handled by the administration per se of each of the individual schools. So I just wanted to make the superintendent aware of that in case anyone raises the issue to him.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're just about done.
Any other issues for our meeting this evening? Trustees? Okay, then many thanks to you all for making yourselves available and for coming up with the requisite equipment to be able to meet virtually. It is greatly appreciated. We apologize for having to invade everybody's homes in these uncertain times, but we appreciate it very much. And thank you for making yourselves available on short notice that we could deal with the cash flow issues. It is greatly appreciated. With that, motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Many thanks. Please stay safe and healthy. Thank you, trustees.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
I needed a 4 and a